Hello there, ghastly guys, wicked women, eerie NBs, Pretentious Fiend here, and it is the season of Spook, and I am still in fucking lockdown. Yes, oh fuck, now I'm dizzy again. But like any self-respecting weirdo and vivacious fiend, I love Halloween. I love dressing up. I love the pomp. I love the ceremony. But why do we love dressing up? And more importantly, why is it that people love deeply indulging in the macabre for an evening? But before we actually dig into that, let's take a little bit of time to look into what Halloween actually is and where it came from. Dating back well before the Christianization of Britain, Halloween has its roots in a pagan fire-based festival called Samhain. Yes, it is spelled Samhain, but that's not what it's actually called. It is Samhain. Now, held, of course, on October 31st, it came just after the season of harvest and just before a bitter and brutal winter, but the Druids kind of viewed this in a really New Year's kind of way. It was the closing of their harvest season and opening up into this new winter, and because they had a very symbolic relationship with death, as a lot of ancient cultures did, they viewed this as when the old prior year died and when the new year was reborn. And this kind of meant that the barrier between the two worlds was at its weakest, and this weakening of the fabric of reality would basically allow all the people who had died in this past year or this past season to go on to the next world, to pass by. But also it would be a vicious two-way door kind of system, allowing spirits and sprites to come forth from the other world and have a bit of playtime in our world. Most notably, and I'm probably going to butcher this word, the She, which referred to a pretty broad range of elf-like creatures that manifested in ways from being pests all the way through to really, really serious and deadly omens. Probably most famously is something like the Banshee. Because of the inherent danger that people thought that these spirits represented, they started adorning themselves in disguise. At first, they just would cover their faces in ash to hide their identity, then eventually kind of morphing into wearing quite elaborate disguises to either ward off or even trick some of these spirits. Pagans kind of had an interesting relationship with identity and spirit. There seems to be an intermingling of identity and worry, a little bit like the internet age, which I find really interesting because a lot of Judeo-Christian kind of mythology, these spirits already know who you are. They see you, they see through to your soul. Angels, demons, God always can see straight through you and to your core. But I find it kind of interesting that these objectively more holistic cultures have a ability to hide and understand their identity from spirits and from those spiritual anxieties. But it's this use of disguise to trick or hide your identity from spirits that we kind of still have the idea of costume today with Halloween. And when the big old world of Christendom came by, like it does with a lot of pagan rituals, it co-opted it. The Halloween that we really know today in 2020, the year of all that is sandy and fun, really came into its own from the Irish migration to the US after the potato famine. But what does this actually mean for us today? And how do we fit Halloween into our cultural zeitgeist? If we look at it anthropologically, Halloween at its core is about death imagery. It is about death and all things macabre. Sure, by now it's been commodified and marketed and sanitized to a pretty severe degree, but it at its core still has everyday regular people, including their children, indulging in some pretty significant death imagery, a chance for people to relish in all things dead and vile. If Halloween was to be a festival that occurred in a different culture, we would look at it with a very macabre eye. It is people embodying and emulating death. And the reason that that's kind of interesting is because to the normal whites, death is a kind of removed, slightly abstract subject to a lot of people, particularly death imagery. Within mainstream, first world, Western white culture, death is something that people whisper about, they don't like to be reminded a lot of, and it's something that a lot of our privileges kind of stave off. Our relationship with the deceased's body, there is this very absent, closed casket kind of relationship for a lot of them, and this can be in quite stark contrast to a lot of other cultures, in which they kind of openly, not relish, but openly indulge in this familiarization with death imagery. In the West, it's something we sorely forget. All human beings, all of us, have a pretty inherent curiosity surrounding death and the macabre, and I really truly believe that Halloween is a thinly veiled attempt to indulge in this curiosity, to surround yourself with a safe version of death. You can literally put yourself into something evil or something fearful's skin and subconsciously familiarize yourself with that macabre curiosity for an evening. Comparing modern day now to its ancient pagan roots, I can't help but think that as death became less of a day-to-day part of our lives, through medicine, technology, privilege, blah, 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 that the disguises and costumes worn shifted from warding off and tricking the spirits through to emulating them. An example of familiarizing yourself with the macabre and death-like things is a trend that happens within media, within film. Brutal and honest and ugly films about war are actually best received during relative times of peace. During wartime, or times of great strife, they do not do as well financially or critically. It kind of leads me to this thought that there's a sort of quota that we have in our mind for dark and confronting and challenging imagery. And when that's not being met, we crave it in some sort of way, and that's when we can indulge in darker forms of media that are going to challenge us more. Humans crave answers. And one of the biggest posers of questions within any form of existence is death. And since certain societies kind of have a bit of a taboo about earnest and straightforward conversations about death, particularly around children, people will find these bizarre little outlets to harvest and foster that curiosity. Because I think as mortal beings, which we all are, we have a kind of desire to familiarize ourselves with death. Some sort of self-preparation, some sort of subconscious program in which we want to make sure we're not caught unawares at the time that we die. That we can kind of approach this with a familiar eye. But that kind of just sums up this one aspect, which is this obsession with the macabre. But with Halloween, there's also this enormous cultural performative angle. There is this huge side of kind of lightweight flexing to your neighbors. There is a competitive element. Who has the best costume? Who puts on the best yard displays?
Trick or treating.
Which, yes, the kids want candy. I fucking want candy. But you are going door to door, showing your neighbors this evil identity that you have taken on for the evening and then getting rewarded with food for it. Food plays an enormous role in cultural events. The eating of food that has been made to you or given to you shows trust within your neighbor, shows trust within your culture. And the giving of food shows generosity and care. And so the community building that trick-or-treating actually does must be enormous, particularly for children. You're showing them that these people within your neighborhood, within your tribe, within your subculture are trustworthy. These are people you can literally take food from and feel safe in that knowledge. A more modern, maybe you could even say a more post-modern angle that we can look at Halloween through is this ideal of escapism. So many forms of dress and costume, all the way from going as something stupid to a party through to really elaborate and immensely amazing cosplay, is about embodying an identity that you don't get to embody in your day-to-day life. Does your day-to-day life crush you and make you feel insignificant and irrelevant? Well, find a costume or find a character that represents that strength, that represents that freedom that you desire. Now, I know a few people are going to see this and probably think, Brandon, you're overthinking it. This is just Halloween. It's just a little bit of fun. But I am called the Pretentious Fiend, and I will look into these things with a critical, vicious, and very bored, sad eye. The reason I find this fascinating is that whether you agree with me or not, or whether you like it or not, we do live in a kind of culturally conservative society in which people do act squeamish around death, in which people do act squeamish around a lot of things. And then there's this one bizarre night in which pretty milquetoast, boring type motherfuckers will adorn their children to look like something dead, to look like a corpse, to look like a villain. Now, since Halloween absolutely and unequivocally is about the dark, the macabre, the other, the feared, to dress up as someone else's culture during Halloween and put them in with that group of things, can you fucking see why that's insulting? Maybe. Not only may you very well be embodying something sacred and private from their culture and using it as a costume and diminishing it, you're putting it side by side with ghouls and goblins and skeletons. That really says something, guys. That really says something, and what it says is, fuck you. These people who are dressing up as Native American or openly mocking the First Peoples of Australia, fuck, that's bad. They are so disconnected from the cultures they're emulating in these costumes that they do view them with that same macabre curiosity. They do view them as this ghoulish other little thing that they think that's a valid expression of macabre curiosity. So alas, we come to the end of our bizarre little spooky journey, and the part where I embarrassingly ask you to like, share, subscribe. But let me know in the comments, because it's good for the algorithm, what you're going to dress as for Halloween, and please, for the love of God, be kind to other cultures and don't fucking do it. Brandon Valentine, the Pretentious Fiend here, and I'll catch you guys next time.